Good afternoon. I hope you're all doing well. And welcome to Leveraging a Mobile-First Strategy to Maximize Conversions, brought to you by Unleashed Technologies and SocialToaster. My name is Scott Greenwell. I'm the Creative Director at Unleashed Technologies. And Jason, if you could go to the next slide. My name is Scott Greenwell. I'm the Creative Director here at Unleashed Technologies. I'm a co-founder, and we've been doing web and application development for roughly the past 10 years. I've also got Jason Spooner, the Director of Media Buying for SocialToaster, on as well, and we'll be going through a few things that you may know already but are going to expand upon those items. And Jason?
Hey, everybody. Oh, sorry. I just want to say, hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to walk through this with everyone, and let's kick her off. Scott?
All right. So, again, what I wanted to start with is sort of going over some of the adages that we've all heard. Being in media agencies, we all understand that the landscape between mobile and desktop has changed dramatically over the past 10 years or so. And even looking back at 2010, when we were just emerging into that mobile strategy and responsive themes and that sort of thing were becoming very popular, most users were still looking at websites using desktops over mobile devices. And we can see by 2013 that we were pretty near that 50%, and today we are most certainly closer to the 55–60% of all traffic that hits websites being on mobile devices, mobile and tablet devices. And while that actually is something that we're well known about, a lot of us aren't actually catering to our audiences. If you could go to the next slide. Where this actually applies is in our mobile marketing. So when we send out, we're all trying to do responsive emails and responsive marketing, but we may not be targeting in a strategic fashion based off of the numbers that we've seen. Now, these numbers that you see here, this 15, 38, 44%, are all based off of all traffic across all industries here throughout the United States as far as number of emails that were being read on it. So this excludes tablets and excludes desktop devices. And the reason for that is we wanted to see if people were actually utilizing that 600 pixel standard that we've all been operating under, or if more and more people have less available space. And what we found is when we started doing the responsive sites back in 2010, most email was still being opened on desktop applications or in webmail. By 2013, that had more than doubled as devices were more common, multiple types of iPhones and Androids were easily available, and people are more and more on the go. By today's standards, we're at 44%, and it is only increasing. So across all industries, almost half of all of your emails are being opened up on a mobile phone. And to that point, we need to make sure that we're actually marketing to those people. Even though they're standards, it's not always coming across in the correct fashion. So talking about those responsive emails, if you could go to next slide, Jason. How do we actually make this work for our responsive emails, and what's the importance of responsive emails? On that same statistics, we found that a responsive design in an email platform will yield at least a 15% increase in unique click-throughs. And when we're talking about thousands and tens of views, large increase in potential click-throughs and conversions. Another thing that you've probably already heard before is that breakpoints are dead. On that, in the fact that in 2010, devices were much more uniform. We had a 320 wide phone by 480 phone, and then we would design for tablets at 768 pixels, and then again for desktops at 1024 and higher. And while that worked well then because of the limited amount of devices, in today's standards, we have everything from Nooks to iPhones to Androids and even some of the newer Blackberries. And these are all different size devices with different screen dimensions. And so if we design for these particular breakpoints, we have a much greater chance of getting onto a device that doesn't match, and then our design is no longer formatted in a correct fashion. So we, as Unleashed and Social, recommend at making these fluid designs. So instead of defining size as a max width for your emails, building them in a single column format that fills out the entire space and then allows it to easily degrade as it continues to contract in size. We want to make sure that the emails themselves, there's no side scrolling, there's no weird images that would expand these boxes and make it feel as if we were marketing in a mass set, but more particularly to them and their device. When we think about responsive emails as well, it's not just the email that's being sent and making sure that the email is responsive. We need to make sure that our landing pages are also optimized for these mobile conversions. Sometimes, as media agencies and marketing, we reutilize systems like HubSpot or other marketing platforms to easily create these responsive emails, send and manage our campaigns. But something that we've seen is very common as well is that we're not taking the same thought where we're actually sending them. So if we've done a large campaign through HubSpot, we have these beautiful emails, they're responsive, they work well in every format, and then a user clicks on your call to action, taken to a web page, and it's larger than their phone can actually read. And that causes large amounts of drop-off. So when we're thinking about a mobile thought as one actual campaign, it's not just are we getting them to where we want them to go, but does from the point they receive an email to the point they convert actually match the format and the device. And one thing that we don't want to overlook is the branding component. Using tools such as HubSpot or MailChimp or these other things, they generally have their own look and their own feel. And without taking the time to convert the MailChimp or the HubSpot campaigns into your branding, there is a good chance that that will come off as non-consistent, and to a user it may seem like it's a phishing scam. While at the end of the day it's the same content, the same people, the difference in visual branding is extremely jarring to most users. To try and highlight that. So when we're thinking users. So we want to make sure that those are removed as much as possible and allows us to focus our users on the particular message and the particular story that we want to tell. The other item that I want to say and talk about is the fold is dead. And I know that we've all heard this. Over the past 5-10 years, the users of the web have been trained to scroll to find more content. The pages are starting to become more breathable. We're not as worried about scrolling through these items. So we want to make sure that we utilize this behavior to our benefit. And also, by utilizing this, we can tell a story and we can focus our users within that story. So what we think of is, instead of page folds, we think of page views. And what I mean by that is, if we have a story, we would want one logical thought presented within one page view. So if we have a device phone, or a phone device, as we see here, this lorem ipsum, we have one title, a quick synopsis, and an image related to that one thought. From there, a user would then scroll, get to the next page view, and would be presented with a next logical thought to tell our story. This makes it very quick for the user to scroll through this content, as well as makes it a little bit more engaging. They're getting information, they interact with it, are engaged again, and eventually get to our conversion. When we're looking at these particular page views, we want to make sure that those logical thoughts are devoid of any ancillary items, much like we were talking before. And making sure that when we move to this site, thinking about the mobile platform, we also have to consider our site speed and caching. This is really the third component to the technology side of our campaigns, making sure that users are quickly and easily able to get to the information that you've prompted them to get to. Now, Google has provided multiple statistics over the years for site speeds, and one of their primary metrics is the 4-second rule. Every second after 4 seconds, a user is waiting for a page to load, 15 to 20% of our viewership drops off and are no longer willing to wait. So by 10 seconds, we can assume almost 100% of our entire viewership has dropped off. There is a smaller percentage that will wait. Those are your people that are used to these dial-up and DSLs from the 90s, and those are a very rare occurrence in our world. Another statistic to help sort of mine and figure out what we're doing to get these site pages down is that Google has put out an average site size across the internet. We took that pool. The average size is roughly 1.6 megs of information between imagery, video, and any ancillary JavaScript that needs to be loaded and processed. A lowest common denominator 3G speed, that would translate to 10 seconds plus on a load time. And we can assume that based off of Google statistics, that a majority of your readership has not even seen your call to action or your landing page and has instead dropped off. So there are two things that we can do to try and make sure that our site size remains smaller, either by doing lazy loading, so instead of having when the page loads a load, but instead only loading what is visible within that page view, and then from there loading our ancillary information. We'll make the initial load smaller and will allow users to read content while the rest of the page is downloading. And then the second item is to reduce unnecessary animations and images for our mobile breakpoints. Anything that we can remove or only display on tablet and desktops will again decrease that load speed. And this is probably one of the most unthought of portions of our process, and what makes it so successful when we actually do deploy our campaigns, because they are fast and because they're easy to get to and read. Now, we talked a little bit about emails, the responsive needs for our emails, responsive needs for our landing pages, and the site speeds associated to those. But I'd also like to pass this over to Jason to talk a little bit about the social components and how we can leverage social media to also help engage on this mobile platform.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what social media was like on a mobile device. This first part of the presentation was really focused on email as a communication channel, marketing channel, and then driving someone to a landing page that's optimized. We also utilize social media to drive individuals to landing pages or websites or other stations where we want them to take action. And so it's really important to start thinking through, even more so than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, what that mobile consumer, mobile user is on social media. So right now, this day and age, currently nearly 80% of social media time is spent on mobile devices. And if you think about it, Snapchat and Instagram are 100% mobile. You don't go to a desktop to even look at Snapchat or Instagram unless you're searching for a link for something. And that really, when you start thinking about that and you start thinking about your demographic, it paints a pretty clear picture that your content that's being shared on social media sites should also be mobile consumable. And what does that actually mean? If you think through what the average use case is for an individual on their mobile phone browsing a social media site, we tend to find painting the picture of somebody that's waiting either in line at the grocery store, or maybe waiting for their car to be fixed, or they've jumped on their phone during a commercial break if someone's watching television, or they're waiting for their kids, or they're just killing time. And they kill time in small buckets, in small incremental slots. And so what we want to advise is that if you're looking to hit that mobile consumer and that mobile user, go with shorter videos, Someone's not going to be able to stand in line for a minute, waiting to get through an entire video. Make sure your video is short. Go with lighter messages. Go for smaller ask. Things that are much easier for somebody to do on their social media device. If you're trying to get somebody to fill out a really extensive, long form, trying to get them to push through a multi-payment gateway, multi-step payment gateway to make a conversion or make a sale, that's just not going to happen when they're in line at the grocery store. You really need to look for lighter messaging and shorter videos. On the other side of that, we have ad placement on social media. And just like content, you want to think through your ad placement as a mobile use case or as a mobile scenario. For mobile, you're hitting a different demographic than you are with a desktop social media site. You got to think through, who are you trying to target? Younger audiences are heavily mobile use when it comes to social media. So is the Hispanic demographic. We're working with a Hispanic CPG company currently, and 98% of all of the sales are coming from mobile devices. 80% of the site traffic is coming from mobile, which means that when we harness the power of social media advertisements, we're placing those on mobile devices. Again, we see across the board with our clients that mobile drives awareness and engagement, but people do come ultimately to a desktop to drive conversion. People just don't have the time to fill out forms, extensive payment process fields, anything like that while they're waiting in line or while they're just casually browsing on their phone. They come to the desktop to drive conversions. And that's why when you're looking at remarketing and retargeting, which I assume everybody on this call is familiar with because we're all agencies, we're all marketers, really start investigating if you have a system in place that's multi-touch, cross-platform enabled. And what that means is it's all well and good if you're remarketing to somebody on your phone. They come to they come to your site on their mobile phone, and then you remarket to them on the same mobile phone. And that's all well and good. But what's better is that if they come to your site on their mobile phone, but then you remarket to them when they're on a tablet or a desktop, or they're at a place where they can take more time in making a purchase decision or conversion decision. So we really employ everyone just to kind of think through and make sure that when able, they're using a multi-platform remarketing retargeting campaign. All right, Scott, I'm going to turn this back over to you to finish her off.
All right. Well, thank you. Realistically, we've covered a majority of the information that we wanted to, but I did want to leave you with a couple of tidbits. You'll be getting a presentation after this call, just as a wrap-up, and it has some of the links that we were talking about in there as far as our Google statistics and where we pulled some of our site speeds and usage. And one of the things that we wanted to do was open up and see if you guys had any questions related to what we've either discussed or something similar along those that we would be able to answer while you guys are on the call.
All right, guys, I have a question from one of the users on the call. Scott, this one's for you. It's just, I'm going to read this to you.
Okay.
Is there a best practice when it comes to field forms on the conversion page? What do you recommend on a mobile form versus a desktop form?
So when we're looking at mobile forms versus desktop forms, I'm assuming you mean number of fields, length of the form, that sort of thing. I don't have any direct statistics as far as that I can point you to, but what I would say is that we do see an increased amount of conversions on mobile forms that are 5 or less fields, and none of them are long field forms. Anything that asks the user to write more than a word or two, a name, an email, generally is dissuading on a mobile platform because people, unless they're sending a text or doing a tweet, something along those lines, are not really used to do long form. People really don't like typing out large amounts of information. So if they can select an option that has these longer form sets of information versus filling them in, you're going to see much more conversion rates in that sort of a set.
Great answer. We also have another question. This one I believe is for me. We talked about cross-platform retargeting and remarketing. Can you give some examples, platforms that do what you're talking about? That's a great question. I mean, if you look at Facebook and you look at Google, both of them allow for cross-platform, multi-platform retargeting, remarketing through the individual's account. So if you are utilizing Google and you build our retargeting, remarketing list, and somebody is logged in on both their desktop device and their mobile, to that person you'll be able to cross-pollinate across both devices for Google. And the same thing with Facebook. And then there are also other much larger third-party ad networks that you can go, DSPs, DSSs, that also utilize that technology, but it's tied to accounts, it's tied to logins, it's tied to knowing who that individual is, and that's really currently the only way to do a cross-platform, multi-platform retargeting, remarketing campaign, is that the ad server itself has to be sophisticated enough to realize that who the individual is on their computer and on their phone at the same time, or near enough close to each other. And that's all about using accounts, login information, and just deep data. And then lastly, another question, Scott, I believe this is for either one of us. How do you recommend bridging the gap to actually get a conversion to your site if you're trying to leverage those platforms? If you're trying to utilize retargeting, remarketing, which I think is what the angle is, you just want to have consistent messaging that drives awareness through the funnel. If we're using the initial touch point, let's put everything together. If we use an initial social media ad on mobile that hits somebody on their mobile, they come to your website, they come to your landing page, they sign up for your email subscription, whatever it is. That's all about building awareness and familiarity with the individual. Then you send them a couple mobile optimized emails. You start to drive them with a little bit more information. Maybe you hit them with a coupon code. Maybe you just give them more research information. You get them to trust your brand, feel more comfortable with the messaging. You ask them occasionally to come visit your site that's mobile optimized. They get cookied. They're logged in. Then they go to their desktop at work. They start to see your ad. They start to become more familiar again with your project, but now they actually have time to sit and fill out a payment form or to complete a purchase, complete a conviction point. And that's kind of how it all, the whole system would tie together and work in and of itself. Scott, do you have anything to add?
Well, and actually, I think the question is more targeted. I'm looking at the chat here. As far as bridging the gap using Snapchat and Instagram, as we mentioned those as being best for mobile, how do we convert from Snapchat and Instagram posts into actual leads? And I would think that there are two methods here. In my opinion, I'll pass this back over to Jason in a second. On the Instagram side of things, that's what Jason was just speaking to, trying to build brand awareness and show imagery to a user that may have that 2 or 3 second set. The Instagram side of things is more for that brand awareness, brand recognition. Whereas Snapchat and what we've used it here for at Unleashed Technologies is more of an instant communication tool. So instead of leveraging contact forms or leveraging embed web viewers and web chat clients, allowing people to get to your Snapchat and converse with you directly is probably one of the most engaging ways you can do it, and using that as an advertising platform. And Jason, I'll pass this back over to you as far as the particular advertising set, but both of those in my mind are both communication and brand awareness.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Just a couple of best practices on Snapchat. If you do want to drive somebody to a website or to a landing page, the best practices are to utilize several different stories to build awareness that you're about ready to give them a URL. If you try to cram in a URL into an 8-second video or a 10-second video, either one, you're not going to have enough time to really explain the benefit of going to that website or that landing page, and two, somebody's on their phone watching a string of videos. They don't have a pencil handy, they're not going to remember it. They might screen capture it if they think to do it, and that's why you want to kind of give them the heads up. You know, if you talk through a message and you're sharing maybe a discount code or a coupon code, or you're wanting to share a really awesome funny video or blog post that's been posted to your website, use several different stories, talk it up, show them what they're going to get, and then just dedicate a single story to sharing that URL, having the URL written down in the text or the copy so that they can either screen capture it or write it down or just, you know, remember it. But that is a best practice that we've seen be effective if you're trying to draw someone away from Snapchat. All right, and we have time for one last question. Scott, I'll let you answer this first, and I'll come back behind with any points that I want to add to it. But this last question is, you comment a bit more. Can you comment a bit more about video on mobile? You mentioned shorter lengths for video, but in general, do you have any advice for leveraging video specifically to help drive mobile conversions?
Well, and I think that I would actually turn it around and answer your question with another question. Who are you trying to reach? And so if you're looking at an older audience, providing value and knowledge in that for an older audience is going to be much more engaging to them than it would be to a younger audience. Whereas if you're trying to be playful, quick-witted, and more engaging and silly, if you pardon my language, as far as the content that is within that video. Again, if you're doing shorter length videos, you can really only focus on one set. So is this just an awareness video, like a culture video or something along those lines, in which you would post it up and maybe those are auto-playing? Or is this actually trying to build awareness around a particular service or offering? In which case, for the older audiences, I would combo the service with knowledge gains, and with the younger audience, I would actually try to be more fun and playful and poke at what you're trying to sell, in my opinion, as far as like a service or an offering, because they're generally not the type of people to be sold. They like to come up with their own ideas, as the millennial generation has coined it. And Jason, would you like to add to that?
I think that is pretty well spoken and well set out. The only thing I would add is, don't be afraid to have multiple videos. There's a lot of times where I feel like we work with brands and partners that try to cram everything they can into a 10-second video, when in reality they could just have 2 or 3 different videos. You have that luxury of space, and you have that luxury of inventory and of creative. Don't feel like you have to push everything into all the videos. You can have them run in succinct if you'd like to. You can run them in different orders. You can have it set up in Facebook and other platforms so that you're only engaging people that have already viewed certain videos. That's an option that you can have when you set up the campaign in the back end for the audience. So don't be afraid to kind of spread out the video love. And this, because I'm in charge, I want to have one more question that came through that I thought was a really great question. Scott, this is 100% for you. If we aren't using breakpoints for different media platforms, how do we account for each of the display sizes? What tech are we looking at?
Could you repeat that again? I'm not sure if I understand the question.
So we were talking before about designing for mobile landing pages and not needing to use breakpoints anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So if we aren't using breakpoints for different media platforms, how do we account for each of the different display sizes? What tech are we looking at?
So really, it actually has to do with your content and not necessarily the device that they're on. So if your content works best between, let's say, 0 and 500 pixels for a phone, and again, we are still using a particular breakpoint for our media queries, and I might get a little technical, so I apologize ahead of time. So we're targeting a particular pixel size, but instead of doing them holistically at 320, 768, and 1024, we may have multiple different breakpoints for different pieces of functionality. So my menu, if I only have 2 items within my menu, I may be able to break it at a much smaller size than if I have 12 items in my menu. So if I've got those 12 items, which probably is bad practice, but let's say we've got a horrifically large menu, I may have to break that at 700 or 800 pixels because there's just no available room. So when we sit down and we think about our quote-unquote breakpoints or display views, it's really organizing the available format, and then once it hits a point where it becomes either too large or too small to handle the content, then that is at the point where we need to change our flow. Whether that means I'm halfway through a tablet, or maybe even thinking of, is my tablet portrait or vertical? Those are all considerations, but I think it really depends on the type of content that you're doing. Really where it becomes most problematic and you get to your more standard breakpoint sizes is when you're doing a large form and have large amounts of content. Whereas your simplistic forms of content are really only going to have maybe 2 breakpoints. Breakpoint for mobile to be able to switch over to our collapsible fields, and our footer elements. And then on a desktop, it would then expand and show. But the majority of the content would actually not be based on the breakpoint. Does that make sense?
It does to me. So thanks so much for these questions. They've been great. Thanks so much for attending. Please feel free, if you want to reach out, let Scott introduce himself, but just to say, if you have any questions, if something in this webinar has kind of jarred with you and you'd love to talk a little bit more, discuss, both Scott and myself, our information is here. Feel free to give us a call, shoot us a LinkedIn message, give us an email, whatever you want. We're happy to look forward to continuing the conversation with everybody on here. Scott, anything to add?
Nope, I would just say thank you all so much for your time, and we would love to hear from you.
All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day and have a great one. Thanks so much for joining us.